Good morning again, everybody. I feel like I'm gonna get my steps in coming up and down these stairs, so hopefully you don't get tired of my voice. But it's my great pleasure to moderate a discussion today with emerging leaders in the Arctic for the future of our state and our region. So I'd like to call to the stage Miss Alice Glenn, Mr. Sam Schimmel, Eben Hobson, Sadie Blankaflor, and Rena Andrews. If you guys can make your way up here. And thank you, Chancellor Parnell, for your remarks too. I think it's a great segue into this discussion because Rena and I actually are taking a class together this semester on Arctic policy through the university here, which is how we met and how this conversation actually came about. So I truly think everybody here on stage, there's some connection through education, whether it's me and Sadie having met through extracurricular activities and Rena, and so this is just an excellent discussion to have here. So I'd like to start by just having each of the panelists briefly introduce themselves, provide a little bit of background about the perspective that they bring to the conversation today, and really kind of what excites them moving forward.
Testing, okay. Hi everybody, good morning, my name is Alice Kanik Glenn. I now work full-time on my podcast titled Coffee and Kwak. Kwak is the Inupiaq word for frozen or raw meat or fish, and so the goal is to celebrate and explore contemporary native life in urban Alaska. When I introduce myself, I like to introduce who my family is too. So Angayokakak Richard Lou, Arlene Lou Glenn. My parents are Richard Savik and Arlene Ikalin Glenn, and Utkeaving Miu Gurunga. I was born and raised in Utkeavik, which is formerly known as Barrow. I now serve on 3 different boards here in Anchorage. I serve on the Library Advisory Board, the Women's Power League of Alaska Board, and the Alaska Native Media Group Board. And I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll pass it off to Sam.
Can you hear? Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Schimmel. I'm Siberian Yupik and Kanaitsi Indian, and I live in Kenai. Right now, I sit as the chair of the Arctic Youth Network, which is an international organization which is dedicated to ensuring that people, and particularly youth on the ground in Arctic communities, have the tools to be able to advocate for the policies that we need to be able to continue to live the way that we have. And through that role, we look at a lot of different policy solutions. Our main belief is that good policy comes from the bottom up. And really that's what our organization is trying to ensure happens for international, for state, for local, for all policy, is that it originates with the people who are experiencing the changes. And through working on this, on the Arctic Youth Network, I came up with an idea for something called Operation Fish Drop, which is a project that takes what our Native people want most, which is the ability to have access to our traditional foods, and ensures that people in urban areas who aren't always able to access subsistence, particularly this year because of the pandemic, because of high costs, somebody talked about earlier in one of the panels, the cost prohibitive nature of traveling home to our rural communities. Ensuring that our people have access to our traditional foods like salmon. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here. So thank you all for having me. I see that our tribal chair from Kanaitsi is here. I want to thank them, and then also the Center for Native American Youth for allowing me to speak here, as well as you, Jackson. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? My name is Eben Hobson. I'm from Utkeavik, Alaska. I'm the North Slope Liaison for Utkeavik Inupiat Corporation. I'm the filmmaker and the photographer, and also the podcast host of Arctic Science Sessions. My parents are William and Carolyn Hobson. My grandfather, Eben Hobson Sr., was an influential Alaska Native leader from Utkeavik, and I take pictures, I take videos, and I've been making films for about 7 years.
Hi everyone, my name is Sadie Blankaflor. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here today. I'm a program coordinator with Arctic Encounter. and I also serve on the Arctic Youth Network board as treasurer with Sam. So lots of connections here. My family lives in Valdez, Alaska, and I'm a current student at Stanford studying Earth systems and anthropology. And I'm very interested in Arctic issues from both an academic and youth organizer perspective. I'll actually be attending University of Alaska Fairbanks this coming fall in the Arctic and Northern Studies Department. So very excited to see all of the UA system representation.
Hello, my name is Rena Andrew. Thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen to our panel. So my name is Rena Andrew. I'm born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. My mom, Nancy Andrew, she's from St. Mary's, and my dad, Tony Andrew, he's from Tuluksak. I am a UAA student, and I'll be graduating here in a few weeks, May 1st, with my MBA in General Management and double emphases in leadership in public sector nonprofit management. I work full-time and I go to school full-time. I'm interning for the Alaska Native Heritage Center and the Siri Foundation, and I'm on the board for Alaska Native Professional Association. And yeah, I know Jackson. We're taking Arctic policy this semester, so.
With Professor Hirschberg, who I think is attending here today too. So just a full circle.
Yeah, and my boss, Emily Edenshaw, she's somewhere in here too. So yeah, she's my mentor, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I think, our team here at Arctic Encounter is young. I mean, we pretty much, it's none of our full-time job, although over the past few weeks, it's definitely become that. Lots of emails, lots of late-night phone calls. And I think, the power of youth and the influence of our future perspective, and I think both shared hope and concern. I think, when Miss Diane Kaplan earlier asked people to raise their hand, what struck me was the amount of hands that went up for both hope and worried. And I think that seems to be a pretty defining theme across conversations that I have with youth, whether it's here in Iceland or here in Alaska or in Iceland, where Eben and I have attended Arctic Circle together, or in Norway. And so I just want to ask each of the panelists to kind of describe what they hope for the future, also maybe some of the concerns that they have, because as we set forth to create a powerful program that caused people to think and caused people to gather and question the future of the Arctic region, particularly coming out of COVID, I think it's just important that we have youth up here on the main stage talking to all your respective leaders. I mean, ambassadors, ministers, premiers. I mean, it's truly incredible, I think, for us, some of the prep conversations we had, that we're able to sit up here and just kind of that privilege to have this discussion. So I'm really curious to hear each of these panelists share kind of their hope for the future and what they think that will look like.
I'll go first. A lot of my work that I do with my podcast, it has to do with truth, sharing our stories, sharing our truth with one another, and making that consumable and accessible to the masses. So my hope for the future is to be able to just share more truth. A collective truth will better inform decisions made further down the road. And so I think right now we've kind of, at least within, I don't know, since me growing up, it feels like it has been a one-sided, one-sided view on history. And so the more that we can get our collective voices out, the better we are for the future to make better informed decisions. So that's my hope for the future.
Is this the one that works? I guess we're playing magical microphones. In terms of the future, I think that we are at a turning point in Alaska. We're at a turning point in the US as well, and I think in the world. People are ready for us to be indigenous again. People are ready for us to, they're ready to receive the knowledge that we have accrued over tens of thousands of years that have allowed us to survive. And I think with regards to our next greatest challenge, which is climate change, our solutions and our future lie in our past. They lie in our traditions and our ability to use our traditional wisdom in order to provide for our people while also allowing us to capture the new opportunities that are arriving as a result of climate change. You know, when everybody raised their hands, there was a solid mix, as you said, between hesitancy, between fear, between all of these different things. And we do need to be a little worried. That way we stay on our toes, so that we're ready to capture these new opportunities, but we also need to be sure-footed. We also need to be able to say, yeah, we've been through a lot. We as indigenous peoples, we came here first. We walked across the land bridge. We took our canoes over. We survived for tens of thousands of years, and we thrived, you know. And so those tools that we have, that resiliency, that traditional expectation of excellence that we hold and is instilled in us by our aunties and our uncles, that idea of leadership where you provide for all, is something that we're going to need to embody in attacking this next greatest challenge. And I think with regards to this present moment, COVID identified a lot of the issues that we're facing, and it highlighted them. It showed that in rural Alaska, yeah, we don't have running water. It showed that in a lot of our communities, we face food shortages. It showed that we face the highest prices for energy, for gasoline, for transportation in the nation. And it showed us our roadmap for what we need to fix in order to make sure that Alaska thrives. And so I think that that's what I'm hopeful for, is that we take the lessons that we've learned over the past 2 years that highlighted the problems that we've had for a long time, and we start fixing them. So that's what I hope.
My hope for the is it? Yeah. All right. So my hope for the future is being able to provide and live off of our subsistence way of life for generations to come, as we have done so. And I would like to do that without any boundaries, without anybody saying that we can't do it or whatever we do is wrong. And I've learned that, or I've read papers from my grandfather during his time as mayor of the North Slope, and we need to keep on fighting for that, and we need to keep on pushing for more, or for an active subsistence lifestyle in the future.
I'm hopeful that youth will be able to connect with one another and organize with one another across the region, and really be at the table for agenda setting for the future. So often we see, especially in Alaska, people, like young people, leave the state and not come back. They go off and get their education at places like Stanford or University of Washington, and they don't feel the need to come back to the region. And it's really important to consider how we can, retain young people here in the Arctic, and also ensure that we're at the forefront of decision making.
I would say lower food insecurity and increase our indigenous food consumption and create policies so that we can consume our indigenous foods. Alaska imports roughly around 95% of our food. That's why the food is so expensive, and gas is also very expensive. The cost of living in Alaska is also very expensive. So having freezers of native food does help with the food insecurity in Alaska. So having the ability to serve it in more organizations, there are policies that kind of prohibit that. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. And I know, we're coming up on time here, but I just want us all to kind of reflect on the power, again, of youth and the perspectives up here. And I think it's so interesting talking to each of the panelists up here and kind of hearing more of their perspective. But I want each of the panelists to kind of briefly share a moment or an experience or a person that's helped them, whether that's kind of find their footing and find their voice. I know that's something we talk a lot about. The Arctic Encounter, I can't thank Rachel Klander enough, and I know many of us in this room are her friends, for providing this stage and platform. I'm 22. I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula, went to public school, just graduated high school, and just the sheer privilege to have this discussion up here with all these incredible young people is something that I don't want all of us to take for granted. And I want us to come out of this discussion and figure out how we can inject this voice and this perspective into our boardrooms and, into policy discussions and into, the future of food resiliency in the Arctic. I mean, we are going to be at the forefront of these changes. And how can we address that together? And so I just really, kind of as a wrap up here, would love to hear kind of just a quick little insight from everybody on kind of one of those moments that they really felt like somebody in a privileged position was able to help them find their voice and provide them an opportunity that has led them here today.
For me, it's been my family. So my dad and my older sister Patik, who will be speaking on the next panel here, she and my dad, they both are amazing storytellers. And I've always felt like I fell short, like I'm not a great storyteller, but instead it's turned me into a great listener to have such great storytellers in my family. And my dad was like, oh, your sister's gonna be speaking, now you guys have some competition. And I was like, unless it's a foot race around the block, there's no competition between my older sister and I. She's just amazing. So for me, my biggest inspiration is my family.
In terms of mentorship and things of that nature, I always think about my great aunts, who when I was growing up, they'd sit down with us and gather all the kids around and say, hey, come on over. Or they'd distract you with food, say, hey, come on, we're gonna eat. And then they would tell us stories. And the same thing that our uncles would do. They'd tell us stories. Our uncles would tell us stories about hunting and about fishing and about the importance of keeping a clear mind and not being afraid and being able to take decisive actions. And our aunties would tell us stories about staying still, being sure, and ensuring that you listen. Ensuring that you listen to what other people have to say, even if you disagree with them. One of my most valued mentors was my great-grandmother, Stella Zivason. And she would tell me, she said, in the 1950s, we had a bunch of people come out from the state, and they didn't like us being native. But we still had to listen to them. And because we listened to them and we worked with them and we talked to them a long time, we were able to get what we wanted. They left us alone. And I think that's one of the things that's missing a lot of times from my generation at least, is that listening piece. We want to be able to listen. In order to be able to make change, you have to hear what others have to say. And so that's really where it comes from, is my strong native aunties telling me, hey, sit down and listen. And so, yeah.
I would say it's my community, my parents, my family, telling me stories and letting me know what my grandfather did, and letting me know what his brother did, and letting me know what all of my family did on his side, and learning and reading about all the struggles and all the fights that they did to bring us here where we are today.
I'd like to thank Tim and Lisa Myers with Myers Farm. They run the only, I think, commercial farm out in Bethel, Alaska, which is off the road system. And I had the opportunity to work for them halfway through the pandemic. And it was just such a transformative experience to think about food and how food is distributed in a place that is so incredibly rural, and sort of the opportunities and creative thinking that can come up when people see an issue and want to take action. So,
I would say my elders and ancestors, they paved the way for me and other youth, so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my parents and all the mentors I've had in my life, and my peers and friends. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all these incredible panelists and friends of mine. And I really do want this to be a call to action for everybody here in the audience. Talk to the young people in the room. As Rachel called us all today, is talk to 3 people outside of your immediate orbit. Make new friends. Have these conversations and listen and learn. I think that's something that all the young people, I imagine, in the audience, the students attending, are looking for. And so I just encourage you all to seek out those conversations. So I'd just like everybody to join me in thanking the panelists up here in a round of applause. And now I'd invite everybody to go out, maybe grab some